Good Gab, sponsored by Skillskin, a nonprofit organization empowering individuals with disabilities through employment. Hi, it's Steve McBride here, and today we have Tom McArthur, longtime historian and journalist here in Spokane. Thanks for being with us, Tom.
My pleasure, Steve. Nice to be with you.
Heck yeah, we're down here at the new facilities down here at the Spokane Library downtown. It's a great spot.
It's nice to have a place to call home.
Yeah, it's one of the incredible library systems, at least in our state, maybe probably around the country as well.
Yeah, and I think Spokane, when I moved here back in the 1980s, the thought was that Spokane is a nice place to be from.
Okay.
And I have seen it grow out of that feeling and out of that reputation to be the destination in the Northwest. You follow economic statistics, housing statistics, people are moving here because they want to be here.
Right.
And that's pretty cool.
Well, tell us about your journey. You said in the 80s you came here. Where from?
The decade of big hair music, right. I was born and raised in West Seattle and grew up partly in Bergen, Norway. That's my mom's side of the family. So we spent some years going through school, my brother and I, learning the language. So if you need to know how to say anything other than "ufta," I can give you a lesson in Norwegian. And then attended Pacific Lutheran University in the early 1980s, graduated in 1983. My first job ex post university was at a small TV station in Nebraska.
Okay.
Where I did everything, including set the traps for the rattlesnakes. And when the tornado warnings came through, we were instructed to push the TV camera into the safe of the bank vault. We were in an old bank building downtown, and continue broadcasting live on the air, reading wire service dispatches saying where the tornadoes were moving, because this was before motion maps and all the technology we take for granted today. So we had the TV camera in the safe, which we thought was going to be the last room standing if it ever hit that building.
Protect that equipment.
Protect that equipment and keep the message going out. These were farmers and ranchers and people in the area that needed to know what was going on if that tornado was getting near them. And in as real time as we could make it from the wire machines, we were telling them where the tornadoes were moving. Nothing ever hit the building when I was there, and nothing has since.
Did you ever see a tornado?
No, I have never seen one in person.
Me either.
I'm knocking strongly on your desk here. Never seen them. Lots of video, of course, but never seen one in person, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Yeah, part of me, I just kind of want to see what one looks like. I don't think I want to experience that, though.
No. Well, Nebraska's the state. If you want to go see tornadoes, that's where they come through.
Well, so then from Nebraska, how did you make it back to Spokane here, or make it to Spokane?
Yeah, I sent out audition tapes shortly after I was in Nebraska, because that gave me the body of content that I could share. And the news director at KREM liked what she saw, flew me up for the week and met a bunch of people. And on the drive back out to the airport, she says, the job is yours.
All right.
And if you tell me no, I'm going to change your mind.
They really wanted you.
Yeah, which was nice. Yeah. It was part of the King Broadcasting Company, which then had stations in Seattle and Portland and Boise. And we would work as our own little regional network and share stories back and forth, back when we had to fly video cassettes as opposed to a satellite uplink. It was really a fun time to be in the business. Lots of good people. Technology that at the time was pretty cutting edge. We were the first station in the market to go with videotape. And I had interned in Seattle when film was being phased out and videotape was beginning. And to know that the vocabulary we used, A-roll, B-roll, that was from the film days. And it's still used today, even though there aren't strips of film hanging up in the newsroom anymore. Worked with some good people. I think the best piece of advice that I ever got from a grizzled chain-smoking producer on the desk was, sometimes the hardest thing to write is nothing. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He says, sometimes you just need to shut up. Let the story tell itself. And when you're paid for telling words, paid for writing stories, that's kind of hard because you figure, I got to write something. And he says, no, there are times when you just need to step back and let the wind blow, let the baby cry, let whatever it is say what it wants to say. That's also journalism.
Powerful.
And that has stuck with me for all these years.
Well, shoot, I might have to adopt that for this podcast.
Yeah. The hardest thing to write is nothing. Sometimes you just need to listen.
Well, so from, your days in media, what was next in your journey?
After CREM, I worked for a while at KXOY. And after KXOY, I started doing contract programs for KSPS PBS, public television. I had done the daily news business for a while at that point, and I thought, I like to spend time talking to people, meeting people, telling the story, putting pieces together in a more of a long-form documentary program. And so we did about a half a dozen different historical documentaries for KSPS. We went to Calgary and Edmonton up in Canada, which is part of the KSPS viewing area, which is kind of difficult to get your head around, but on cable and satellite, we cover all the way up to the Northern Territories of Canada. And a high point to mention from that experience, when we did the Calgary Remembered documentary up in Calgary, Alberta, it was premiered at the U.S. Consulate in Calgary.
Wow.
With lots of, red carpet arrival and all of that. It was a really cool experience. And that was the first time we really thought, all these notes and scripts and photographs and scans and raw materials for making this documentary, it would be a shame to just put that in a box and leave it on the shelf at KSPS. So we gave all of that to the Calgary City Archives. And I understand from friends who are still up there that every year they have a celebration of Calgary history, and one of the things they do is play our documentary.
That is fantastic.
It's really cool.
Yes. You must, really captured the essence.
It was. We talked to a lot of people at a time when they were at the perigee of their careers, when they were just about to put their feet up and retire. So they were still with it to know what they did and want to talk about it before they retired and lost interest in the business and the hustle and bustle of daily life. When they got the Olympics up there, when they got what's the hockey cup, the trophy?
Stanley Cup.
Stanley Cup. Thank you very much, Steve. Those kinds of stories. When you could get on the streetcar with a long coat and have a couple of bottles in your pocket and and that kind of thing. We interviewed up in Canada a historian who is now deceased, Alec Mayer, who taught me two things about history. He says, he and I were talking, and I said, I really didn't care for history in high school. It wasn't my story. It wasn't my time. I didn't care. And now I have a business card from the Davenport Hotel that says historian. So how did that change? Well, he says, Tom, you're thinking about history all wrong. History is not about what was. It's about what is.
Tell us more about that.
So the corollary to that, that Alec offered, and then I'll come back to answering your question. He says, you go down a hallway in a building with all kinds of black and white photographs of people, like the Davenport Hotel. And you see all of these pictures of what used to be. And the thought is, well, these are all people who died. And he says, no, these are people who lived.
Yeah.
So if you think of them in color, in present tense, as living individuals, then it becomes your immediate experience. So it is your story, and it is your time, and it is your place. And that has helped me have a richer appreciation in the rearview mirror. When Alec, as a historian, says, that history is about what is, the Davenport Hotel is. And when we were thinking about telling some of the ghost stories of the building, Walt and Karen Worthy, the owners at the time, were saying, oh, no, we're not going to talk about people who died here.
I can understand that from an owner's perspective.
You're going to scare all the guests away. We're not going to do that. Until us telling one particular ghost story got us on the Today Show twice. So then Walt
Yeah,
comes to me.
this makes sense now.
Now Walt comes to me and he says, okay, you got any more ghost stories? Because we told the story of Ellen McNamara not as someone who died at the Davenport, but as someone who lived at the Davenport, as a guest, as you and I are guests of that building today. And even though she had a rather unconventional checkout, it was a way for us to honor a past guest. And in the years that I was there, on the anniversary of her passing, we would put a red rose of remembrance on the hearth at the fireplace in the lobby. And oftentimes people would ask, why is that rose there?
Sure.
And it would start a conversation. We could tell them why. We could tell them who. We could say she is a guest here, present tense, because there are people who say that she is still here. Now, I don't know if she is or isn't. That's beside the point. But the fact that a guest who was at the Davenport experienced the same hospitality you and I do today, I mean, it's physically the same space
Sure.
for more than 100 years, that we honored one of our guests just because she was a guest.
That's some service.
I think so, and it lasts. There aren't a lot of things in life that last anymore, but the Davenport, thankfully, in our community does. And the stories of the people that came and went there does. As an interesting piece to look about how things are the way they are, you've probably heard that Louis Davenport washed the money at the Davenport Hotel back in the old
I
days.
have not
You've
heard
not? Okay,
this.
then let me tell you more.
Yeah.
The story is true that Louis Davenport collected all the silver dollars at the time, which were in common exchange, had them go down to housekeeping in the basement, where they were washed and tumbled with the house silver service and issued as new the next day. Now, why would you wash the money? You know,
Well, I'm all ears.
To launder the money. It wasn't for any nefarious reason. There's a theory, and I subscribe to it, originally postulated by Tony Bamonte, the late Tony Bamonte, who was a great historian here in Spokane. And he says, if you understand people's childhood, sometimes you understand them. And this is how he explains why Louis Davenport was obsessed about cleanliness in his operation. And that is that Louis Davenport's father fought in the American Civil War on the Union side, was taken a prisoner of war by the Confederates, and held as a prisoner of war at Andersonville.
Oh, we know that story.
And if you know that story, it's not overstating it to call it hell on earth. Vermin and disease and sickness and no food and on and on and on. So from that world of squalor, Louis Davenport's father goes home after the war, and Louis is born, into a house where his dad is obsessed about cleanliness for the rest of his life, boiling and steaming and scrubbing and cleaning obsessively because of his experience at Andersonville. So Louis grows up in this world where cleanliness is the norm. It serves him well as a restaurateur in
Sure.
Spokane, and then later as a hotelier in Spokane. And it was just one of those quirky little things that he did from his childhood and from his growing up that became noteworthy in the business of hospitality. Because think of the people who touch silver dollars in the course of a day or a week or a month. And Louis wanted to make sure that when you got a silver dollar, it was shiny new, and the paper bills were pressed through housekeeping, so it was a crisp bill when you got it. But think of that from the receiver's point of view, to get a fresh silver dollar and a fresh dollar bill, the respect that gave the guest.
Absolutely.
It was a little thing.
You feel good.
You feel good,
Yeah.
right. That fresh and new honored you as a guest.
Those idiosyncrasies of a person, but that translates into those little things that make people feel so good. That's a great story.
Little things mean a lot, like the song sings, I forget the woman who made it famous back in the 1950s, but yeah, little things mean a lot. Not only washing the silver dollars, pressing the paper money, but Louis Davenport had a tradition of having a fireplace burning 24 hours a day.
That's my kind of man. I love a fire.
In all four seasons. Not because we needed the heat in a Spokane summer, but we needed the abiding symbol of hospitality. The hearth is kind of the heart of the home. And he never really called it his hotel. He called it his house, his home. And he wanted Spokane to feel at home in Spokane's living room, which is what it is still nicknamed today. And you go there today, the fireplace is burning. It's been converted to gas, so that makes it easier to maintain. But it still burns from his original order, 104 years ago.
Incredible. Well, setting the tone of that, what customer service, what hospitality can, look like. What can, businesses today, take from this?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I brought a few notes on the topic of Mr. Davenport's hospitality, knowing that I'm going to take this off, if you don't mind, these headphones.
Of course.
So I can wear my glasses, confess that I need them. Louis Davenport opens the hotel in 1914, and in 1919, he writes kind of a philosophy paper about his philosophy of hospitality. So here is System Magazine, 1919. It pays us to give a little more. Us meaning his peers across the business community. All of us should be looking to give a little more. And under this title, Louis Davenport writes, "Give the customer just what he pays for, skimp a little, or give him a little more than he may expect. Of these three policies, always choose the last, and that is, give a little more." And then he tells here in the article why it pays him. So why it pays him? If you're giving something, how can that pay you?
Tell us more.
That's where all of this comes into play. "You can plan to make your mechanical equipment practically foolproof," writes Mr. Davenport, "but it is very much harder to train employees always to express the house policy. Yet, in the last analysis, it is through employees that the house policy must be principally expressed." So your employees, as your frontline people, express the soul of the business. And this is the best quote I think I've ever read about hospitality. "A surly look or discourteous word is more than enough to banish in a second all memory a guest may have of a comfortable bed or an exceptional meal."
Sure can. I know I've experienced that.
Yeah.
That many of our listeners have too.
Yep. I was sharing before we started recording today, Steve, as you know, that I was at a Ziggy's hardware store in the Valley yesterday. And behind the guest, not for the customer to see, but for the employees to see, was a little sign that said, "Do not point." To point and say, "Oh, well, that's over there." Rather, walk them to what they're looking for. Be a guide in discovery of where this item might be. And so the sign behind the desk at Ziggy's hardware store, I'll give them credit for having this, was "Do not point." Following Louis Davenport's script. Maybe they have never heard of it, but they're certainly following the same idea.
And powerful, right? That you're really delivering service.
And then as a guest or a customer, you feel you have an advocate that can lead you, explain to you, assist you, whatever word you might want to use in that conversation. And the next time you go back, you're going to look for Fred. Or the next time you go back, you're going to look for Jane because they helped you good the last time.
I remember, when I first started some home projects, that was Miller's Hardware on the South Hill.
There you go, right.
Like, I wasn't going to go to Home Depot because I knew I could go to Miller's. I'd spend a little more, but they were going to walk me right to where I needed to be and really deliver that service that I needed.
And you go back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because they know their stuff. Yep. One more quote that I'll share here from Mr. Davenport. "Doing a little more than is expected, I think," and I being Louis Davenport, "perhaps the true distinction between a business that makes good on service and a business that fails to make good on it. The house that leans backward in this respect is constantly putting itself in danger of rubbing some customer the wrong way. Again, if you make it a rule to do only what you feel is expected of you, you do not distinguish yourself from the crowd." You could be giving this lecture in a hospitality school today.
And should be, probably.
And I've given this PowerPoint presentation at the hospitality school down at WSU. to understand one of the original roots of hospitality, probably at its most practiced height, back when telephones were brand new, electricity was brand new, air conditioning was brand new, housekeeping carts were brand new, accordion walls between ballrooms were brand new, and all of those had the first incarnation here at the Davenport Hotel in Spokane. Davenport was world famous and famous within his profession for being an innovator. And sometimes we think, oh, he was trying to push the envelope of scientific research and hospitality. Honestly, and I would tell this to Mr. Davenport to his face, he was just frugal. He was thrifty.
Right.
He was thrifty to the core, but all good in that, because he would do, for example, he would tell the staff never to walk down the center of the hallway, always walk down the sides, defer to the guests so they could walk down the center of the hallway.
He wanted even wear on that carpet.
Of course he did.
Yeah.
Of course he did. Yes, he was thrifty. And a funny aside to that, one day the phone rings at my desk at the Davenport, and it's a woman with a very heavy Russian accent. And I can understand what she's after, and she says that she'd like to come and do a story about the Davenport Hotel. Oh, really? What causes your interest? And then she hands the phone over to somebody from the United States State Department, who continues in English, to explain that they were trying to find ways for Russian media to look at American business and find out what our secrets were. There are no secrets. This was published in Hotel Monthly back in the 1900s. So I said, sure, we'll talk about anything. Come on down. So here she shows up, she herself, a production assistant and a photographer, and they were interested in our historically green program, which means, we'll put liquid soap out, we'll not wash the towels unless you want us to, and all these kinds of things for your service.
Sure.
We just wanted to be thrifty. We don't have to pay for a towel that we don't have to wash. Okay? But that's your choice as a guest. So the power is still in your hands. Service is in your hands. But she wanted to find out, how does doing all of this pay? Because her philosophy that she was going to take back to Russia was, people aren't going to be motivated if it doesn't pay. It's got to have some value in it for us. Otherwise, you don't just be nice to be nice. You want to be thrifty with a reason. So we explained that a room you don't have to clean, a towel you don't have to wash, soap you don't have to replace. Most of it goes into the garbage if it's a bar soap.
Absolutely.
How do you put that into a system of practices that leave the guest in charge, but don't do service that isn't necessary? And it saves you money, it respects the guests, and it means that you can be historically thrifty, historically green. Yeah. Earth-friendly.
I say, and help the earth at the same time.
A healthy earth, right. So rather than say we're taking things away from you, no, we're giving empowerment to you as a guest. You get to decide how green you want to be during your stay, and we'll make that happen.
I love it.
And she took that back to Russia.
We're at Spokane, spreading, good business practices, customer service all over the world.
Right. Well, my own great-grandfather had a drugstore here in town, MacArthur Drug, on the corner of Monroe and Sprague, where the Fox Theater stands today.
Okay.
And we have his notes and his formularies. And oftentimes he would notate things in his remarks to himself. PHQ. And we thought that was a technical term, in the pharmacy business. Is this some medical thing you need to know? PHQ? No. When he had done something good, he wanted to acknowledge his own goodness, and he wrote PHQ, pretty high quality.
Nice. How'd you guys figure this out?
Right. Yeah. And it's just, sometimes you don't hear a lot of comments about doing something well, but he was going to note to his own satisfaction that he had done something good for a customer or a guest. Mm-hmm. And even though they might not know or say that they appreciated the extra effort, he knew that he had given a little more.
So this passion for customer service, you're talking about your great-grandpa, you can tell this drives you. You're a connector of people. You want to, move the needle. Shoot, this podcast wouldn't exist unless you were sitting with Dana Devine and myself having a coffee talking about, what could be. I've
invented a phrase, the currency of kindness. And That means that we all have a printing press of kindness. We can print as many bills as we want and spend as freely as we want of kindness. So it has immeasurable worth, but it doesn't cost us anything to make.
Right.
Just be nice, be kind. I see it in my great-grandfather, PHQ. He knew his stuff. I see it in Louis Davenport. And these are the things that make Spokane stand out from other cities across the country or around the world, is giving a little more, being a little nicer. If we could just think about that in every transaction, how do we do more than anybody else? Give a little bit more.
I think that may, as you say, could be just a mantra of Spokane, because some of the pillars of business, and I worked for some of them, like the Huppins family.
Mm-hmm.
It's my first job. They taught me customer service from the beginning. Eggers Better Meats up on the South Hill, like they really took me to another level when you were delivering service, and we were just, selling meat, but it wasn't that. We were, it was part of an experience. And we did it. And that just has stuck with me my whole life. I was in the hotel business too. And selfishly, I did like to just give a little more because it made me feel good. Someone was having a bad day. They were long day of travel, whatever might have been happening. If I could just turn that frown upside down in that moment, I felt good. And I wanted, everyone was just having a better day. It was good. I liked it.
Yep. There was a housekeeper who would take the bus to work every day, wearing a suit and tie. He would walk in the front door as a guest, dressed like he owned the place. And one day I complimented him on his appearance before he went down into the lockers to change into his housekeeping uniform. And he says, yeah, it just helps me to get into the right mindset. Whatever I do, I want to do it well. Because he had been a refugee from Africa in one of the countries that had really had a horrible experience in his childhood. So here he was in the United States, given the keys to, one of America's exceptional hotels, and to be a piece of operating that. And one day as he was going home, he had changed out of his housekeeping uniform and was standing by the lobby fountain in his suit and tie, again, looking like he owned the place. So we started a conversation, and he says, whether or not this building, but someday I will own the place, and this is practice.
Yeah.
So I don't know whatever happened to him. I hope he's doing well. I think he would be doing well with the right attitude and the idea that you can print kindness and spend it as much as you can.
Love that story, Tom.
Yeah.
Well, tell us more about, this idea. I think we look at our community, right? And a lot of business happening here. Is there intersectionality between, business and customer service and your community?
My job currently is with the Spokane Association of Realtors. And that profession has seen a lot of change in the last couple of decades as house hunting has moved online. I think it's 98% now of all people looking for a house begin their search online.
I'm one of them.
Yep, it's convenience. You want to see what's out there on your own time, sometimes in the evening, sometimes early in the morning, or a lunch break or something. You can check and see what properties are available. So it's given amazing power to the buyer. But then you also look at the percentage of the number of people who work a transaction with a human being, with a realtor, with a broker. And that percentage is still pretty high, right around 80%. So if we have the technology, why do we still want to deal with someone? Because that's
we're
who
humans.
we are. Right, that's who we are. And you talk to any broker who's been around the business for a lot of years, and they'll tell you that it's the human relationship, the human conversation that people really treasure. Now, it's related to the largest purchase you'll ever make in your life, and sometimes you just feel comfort in having somebody in that conversation
need a little
with
assurance.
you. Right. Am I doing the right thing? Is this the right way? And so far, they haven't come up with an algorithm that does that. And I don't think they ever will. We are analog beings, and I think to relate to an analog being is where we find relationship. I've never felt I had a relationship with a phone or a computer or, any of those things. But a lot of people, yeah.
Well, so I hear you there, and I love that analogy. We are analog beings. We have to be present. That is the connection. We're seeing business change, though, in front of us right now, from the way you order things to even interacting in a restaurant where you're just, on a pad, putting in your order. And it feels like there's something being lost here. And like, at least from my perspective, I'm perceiving it as, maybe even bad customer service. When someone they haven't taken the time to, maybe greet me or really understand what's happening. And all of a sudden there's no connection.
Yeah. And a lot of technology today, frankly, I find creepy. As I was waiting to have this conversation with you today, I was planning a meeting of the Spokane Valley Heritage Museum Board of Directors. I serve on that fine organization, and we were talking about having our next meeting over dinner, the first post-COVID board meeting with all of us present over dinner. And I said, I'll bring a Costco pie. Not 30 seconds later, that picture was on my Facebook feed. Costco pie. Here's where you get it. Now, if I were a vendor, I would appreciate that was a necessary real-time market opportunity for
Absolutely.
me. And here's the product. So I can see where technology can facilitate the availability of something that we're looking for or talking about. That's nice. But ultimately, I'm going to deliberately look for a place at Costco to buy that through a human being. And again, there's the self-serve line, and that's fine for those who choose to use it.
Can you? Because I can't. I cannot go through that line unless I have like one item. I want to have that interaction.
I do. Okay, so here's a good story about always finding the human being at the grocery store. Years ago, I went to a certain store in Spokane Valley, and I always looked for the same checker. Because
we're in a relationship.
We'd pick up where we left off. Oh, how's your kid? What did your daughter do this week? And all that kind of thing. So here we are, years later. I'm looking to find somebody to tell the stories of how they grew up in Spokane and what was it like to have a Sunday meal with family. And I asked my checker, and she says, "Oh, I'd be happy to show you." She says, "I even have pictures." And so we sat down and we talked. And she's the founder of the Northwest Black Pioneers. So here we had a picture of a big family having Sunday meal, and we talked about, taking the streetcar down with Grandma, and so she really had some experience back before my time. And after the documentary aired, oftentimes people will call and comment about, the program that you just put on the air. Geraldine Williamson is her name, still very much alive, living in Spokane Valley. And she called me at the station one day. And I thought, okay, usually people call because there's a complaint. So
what's going on?
What's going on? Hi, Geraldine. How are you? And I could tell that she had been thinking about what she was going to say to me. And I thought, okay, this isn't going to be good. But she says, I wanted to call and say thank you. Thank you for including the piece about having a family dinner on Sundays. She says, I know that you were aware that we had these photographs from the Northwest Black Pioneers, but you didn't say these were black people having Sunday dinner. It was people having Sunday dinner. And she says, that is a change of journalism for us, because the photograph identifies us as black, and oftentimes the narrative does too. But if you call somebody in the picture somebody having a family dinner on Sunday, that's what the picture shows.
Sure.
So that's what I said it showed. And that was an eye-opening experience for me to have somebody say, what do these pictures tell you? Well, they tell you some detail. They can even tell you what time it was when they took the picture, if there's a clock on the wall in the back. But that isn't a black clock. It's just a clock. And so if a family has a Sunday meal, it's a family having a Sunday meal. That's really all it is. And that was a moment that I appreciate, Geraldine, and that started as a conversation at the grocery store, to come and appreciate the fact that we have so much in common and to focus on that.
Well, that's community building, right? That's being in relationship with people. Big things can happen, and worlds can change. It sounds cliche, but I know it to be true.
Yeah. But you have to be open to it.
Absolutely. I got to tell you a story, Tom.
Yes, please.
Yeah. You got me on story time. So there was a neighborhood grocery store up off 17th and Ray, and it was called XL. And it was our neighborhood grocery store. And so just growing up as a kid, going there, I knew Patty. She was our checker. I knew the meat market folks. Like we were in relationship. One day, I stole a pack of gum. It was not a good day afterwards. My mom finds this. She knew she didn't buy it. I ended up, walking me back to XL. Here's Patty. I'm a little kid. I'm just tears running down my face. And I'm sorry, Patty. But it changed me because, I knew her and I knew them, and I didn't steal anymore. Because it was one of those moments that changed me. And if it was just, the Walmarts of the world and I didn't know anyone, I was self-checking out, maybe that lesson wouldn't happen to me. And, that shaped me. Mm-hmm. And so, I can just appreciate, us, that strong customer service, right?
Yeah. There's a theory that isn't mine, and I don't know who to subscribe it to, because that piece is not in my brain, but it's that human beings don't have a bootstrap. By that, I'm borrowing a phrase from the computer world, where you turn your computer on and it has a boot sequence, a loaded program that makes it a computer.
Okay.
Humans don't have that. When we're born, you can't throw the switch and we already have a set of known things, a body of knowledge as we're born. A lot of animals have instincts because that's how they survive. Human beings don't. Everything in our bootstrap we learn in the first few years of our lives. So right and wrong, good and bad, pretty ugly, all of those basic functions that cause us to operate as a human being are in our bootstrap that we learn, that we're not born with. So every transaction you have as a baby or a young person programs who you're going to be for the rest of your life. And you can talk to any elementary school teacher. They say, yeah, about 7 years old, your bootstrap is pretty well set. It can be modified, of course, with mentors and behaviors and experiences as life goes on. But how you start as a human being has a lot to say about how you behave for the rest of your life. Like Louis Davenport's dad, he came through this experience of a horrible prisoner of war, and Louis was born into that, knowing that that's what you do, is you keep everything really clean. It served him well for the rest of his life.
Well, we've heard a lot on this podcast about early childhood experiences, and as you put it, you're kind of set.
Not to say there isn't hope. There's always hope. I'm the eternal optimist. There's always hope. And you just have to look for the right people in your life and realize who the bad people are in your life, and that you really ought not to be, rubbing up against that as an influence, but rubbing up against people who are going to lead you in a good place. I was a program director for a scout camp years ago.
Which one?
It was a Chief Seattle Council Cub Scout day camp that moved around different city parks.
Okay. I definitely was a part of that.
Okay, maybe you were
a part of that
camp,
in the 1990s. Yeah.
Over in the Seattle area. And our camp director was this grizzled old retired Washington State Patrol officer. But he and I got along great. And I asked him, and I said, you've seen me behave here as a camper, as a leader, as a staff person. What's your best advice for me? And he says, hitch your wagon to people who are going somewhere. Well, lots of people who don't go anywhere. And that's a choice.
Sure.
You can stay with them. But if you want to go places, try things, be with people, build things, go somewhere, hitch your wagon. The other way to phrase that is, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are.
I love that phrase.
Yeah, I've heard that from my folks a few times too. But Vern said, hitch your wagon with people who are going somewhere. Go somewhere.
Yeah, take that step.
Take that step. And for the rest of your life, go somewhere. Reinvent yourself as necessary. You're doing this podcast as a new thing, a new experience for you. This was not part of your childhood or growing up years. This is headphones, microphone. Look at you. So
It's kind of scary.
hit your wagon with ideas that are going to go and take you to a good place. And you're doing that with this. So thank you for that service to our community and to the many good things you and Dana and your many colleagues at Skillskin are doing to let people realize that every person has value.
Well, right back at you, Tom. Again, yeah, listeners, this wouldn't have happened without this man.
It was a collaborative effort.
Well, indeed. Well, yeah, Tom, thank you.
My pleasure, Steve. This is fun.